I'm going to try to talk in a clear manner about this case, but there is a lot to discuss and I might get a little bit tangled up. It could be easily a 2-hour video and I just want it to be 15 minutes. I wasn't going to talk about this crime. It's very heinous, but it does relate to a couple of videos that I've made lately actually, and I'll explain how. And some of you that have watched my channel for a long while, you'll know the other reason why I'm talking about this now. I don't know a lot about this case and I don't profess to have answers from a professional standpoint, but I think when people do talk from that angle, they should do it in an intelligent, responsible manner. So what case am I going to talk about? So Michele Deegan. So that's Boudreaux without the X and a double E in Deegan. Michele Deegan, she was 55 years old when in October this year she drugged her 7-year-old twin daughters and took a handgun, shot them dead, and then turned the gun on herself and committed suicide. So 55 years old with 7-year-old daughters, several surnames. So a couple of things, we can easily know already. Michele had been married before the husband that she had the children with. And I'm assuming that it is this final husband that she did have these children with, because this was the custody battle that she was embroiled in. She's getting divorced and she is stating that the husband is narcissistic and abusive. Narcissistic abuse does damage. It's devastating. It's something that if you haven't been through it, you could probably only ever inadequately describe it or understand it. So nothing that I say here is suggesting at all that narcissistic abuse isn't devastating, degrading, and exhausting and terrifying. That being said, how do we unpack this first? Firstly, where do I start? Because you've got questions about, the end of one relationship and the start of another. You've got questions about who is the narcissist, if there is one. You've got questions such as, who has the mental health issues and what were they? And what sort of person can commit the crimes that Michele Deegan committed? You've got questions about, how the courts handle these allegations that they are being forced to consider more and more often these days. And what are they discovering more and more often? Well, they're discovering that if it isn't that both people have the narcissistic tendencies, it's often the person making the allegations that is actually the narcissist. So they must proceed with caution, and this would probably frustrate no end the real victims. But they must proceed with caution and have assessments done and find out who is doing what to whom. This is vitally important in the decision-making process. We've got the situation of the children being born to an old mother. So in your late 40s, she's 55 now, so in her late 40s. So we can extrapolate from that she's gone through some expensive, painful IVF treatment possibly. So this is where you have your ovaries stimulated, they are harvested, they are fertilized, embryos are then implanted in your womb. So this is not an unemotional or pain-free experience. Often multiple births will result because embryos often don't survive and make it. So multiple embryos are implanted and it gives an increased chance of success. So sometimes all the embryos implanted survive and result in children. On a side note, my sister's a barrister and she defends the medical profession. And one case was where a couple were suing their fertility doctor because they didn't want twins. They only wanted one child. They wanted to sue him for the burden, the cost, the financial cost of this extra child. Well, you know, anyone going through this process is told what the process is and why, and they are always implanted multiple times. What happens is women will go through the loss, and the father, but you know, the physical, you know, process over and over again sometimes. And if it's one embryo, they just are at a loss over and over again. So, you know, the couple knew the risks, but still wanted to see the doctor. This poor child. I digress. So we need to know, I mean, when did the first marriage break up? What sort of gap was there? Was there pressure on Michele by herself to have children? Was the pressure from the gentleman? You know, we don't know. But I'm guessing that she wanted to get married and have children. Did she rush things along? If he was a narcissist, did all her training count for nothing because of her personal need was greater and she couldn't take her own advice? Now this ties into the videos that I've made recently where people just need to stop and think, because they're not just messing around in their own lives. When you're talking children, you're bringing those children into your life. You can't take that lightly. So, you know, has she ignored the signs of a narcissist, the love bombing, the rushing things along, and gone ahead with it because it suits her agenda and now she's sorry? You know, she knew in that case that she was bringing children into a marriage to a narcissist. I doubt that he is. I think she is the narcissist. Oh, but humanimal, you might say. Narcissists wouldn't commit suicide. Well, that's where you're wrong. People with NPD are at higher risk of suicidal ideation and suicide. Oh, but humanimal, women don't use guns. Well, young women often don't use guns. Violent methods of suicide are often used by young men or men in general. This might be car accidents, hanging, gunshot. But as women age, methods change and they segue from the softer, so-called, more feminine methods of overdose and can include gunshot. So there's so much to look at here, isn't there? There's the marriage at an older age, the older parenthood. When this marriage broke up, could she just not handle the fact that now she's got twins? She's under pressure. Reality of single motherhood, shared custody is setting in and she's not liking it. I mean, did she have postpartum depression? This is where a lot of infanticide, filicide, occurs when it is the mother. Often severe mental illness is involved, psychosis, postpartum depression and psychosis. Putting these memes up on her Facebook and her website. So she was posting in days before, she was posting about narcissists, what the abuse is like, how it leaves people suffering and bereft. And it does, this is true. But, this just seems an attempt at excuses, if you ask me. She has committed the most heinous, disgusting, unloving, narcissistic, foul act. She has killed her children, her young, vulnerable children. She chose not to be the parent that gave these children, if indeed this other parent is a narcissist. She's chosen not to say, I'm going to be their rock. I'm going to instill in them self-esteem. I'm going to use my years of training in this very thing to build up my little girls, to give them faith in their own choices, to allow them to develop good self-esteem, coping methods, etc., etc., etc. No, she's chosen to kill them. It's the ultimate act of, she can't think that they can live without her, that they will never have a chance in life on their own without her. She would rather they were dead. Now, I have to admit, when I've been mentally unwell and had suicidal ideation, and this is during times of great pressure and when I've been on antidepressants, which I warn about because suicidal ideation increases on antidepressants. This should be talked more about. And I urge you to go to Dr. Peter Breggin, MD, on YouTube, just as one source of information about neurotoxic drugs. I have thought about Carnivore Dog and how perhaps, he wouldn't cope without me. I mean, he's a one-woman dog, he really is. He couldn't give a rat's unless it's my ex-partner or his family who Carnivore Dog has genuine fondness for, a relationship with, who he really cared for and got as people he knew. They were safe zones. He, especially my ex, but apart from that, really, he doesn't give a toss about people. He doesn't want them in his face, touching him, even acknowledging him. Just ignore him. He's just not into you. And he's also the typical cattle dog where you would not get within 100 feet. So I had thought, well, you know, his life, I know it's just going to be so hard without me. But it wasn't because he wouldn't have good care, you see. It was because he would be missing me. That prevented me. It didn't make me go, well, I'll kill him as well. I mean, the thought sickly crossed my mind. I was thinking, well, I will have to kill him as well. And because I'm not a sick fucking bitch, I thought, well, I'm just going to have to just keep going and get through this somehow. And so he's basically, my child has kept me alive. Now, I wasn't the victim of narcissistic abuse. I wasn't going through a divorce where I was going to be forced by courts to share custody of 2 human children. But is this the case with Michele Deegan? Was she the victim? I think what she's done is inexcusable. Look, okay, let's go to Chris Watts for a second. Now, he spent a lot of time with grandparents. If you believe he's narcissistic, then they were neglecting him too. I've noticed a lot of people diagnosed with narcissistic traits or NPD, well, they were grossly neglected as a child. Do you think they might be fawned on? No, they were missing out on that true human connection. And I don't really know that Chris Watts would be a narcissist. Now let's think about him and Shanann and the fact that it's thought that he wanted her to get pregnant. Now, this could be something cruel that someone would do and, you know, say things like, I want you to get pregnant, and then go and have an affair. Fact is, a lot of men have affairs when their wife is pregnant. But then there is actually a mechanism in the human body, in the human biology, whereas for a brief time after the birth, their testosterone drops, and, you know, this period can last too. It's just to keep this child alive until it's sort of walking and a bit more independent, right? You know, biology is fascinating, and evolution is fascinating. The human animal is fascinating. We are animals, and these things happen in our species as well as others. Okay. Yeah, so was it a similar situation where you know, she's gone through this whole thing with someone who's then abandoned her? Or is it just the abandonment itself that's, you know, really hurting her, let alone any narcissism being involved? Sorry, I'm not talking clearly. I mean, this is a really rough one. This is probably one that I should write a script for. I always say that I should really do that. But honestly, I could make, you know, 10, 20-minute videos on this, unpacking each subject. What I just wanted to say was, here is a therapist who hasn't been able to use her own training and knowledge, it seems, to, if she's correct, avoid a narcissist. She's gotten embroiled in a relationship, but not only that, she's chosen to bring children into it. And not only that, it wasn't by accident. She purposefully drove the relationship through an extremely intense experience to get these beautiful children, these little blonde twins, right? Innocent, absolutely innocent. And she's chosen to end their lives and her own. She's made that choice. She's decided, you're just going to fail. You're going to suffer. I mean, what's really going on here? Who is the sick person here? I can tell you who the abuser is. She is the abuser. She has killed these children and then killed herself, so she's not around to take responsibility. And she's tried to blame this on her partner. 911 calls had stopped to the house in the last year, so perhaps since separation. And at the same time, the children weren't really seen much. They weren't out playing a lot or just seen walking around with mum a lot. And I know we've had clusterfuck 19, but, the neighbours said this is, different to when the father was there. She's left with debt and she's struggling. Well, she's in the house and she's got a boarder, probably would have been helping pay that mortgage. But I can imagine just depression, betrayal, there's a whole lot of mental fuckery, isn't it? To go through with killing your own children. So, I think either she is evil or she had to have been suffering severe mental illness. And this is regardless of narcissistic abuse or not, because I think someone who is suffering that they might have to, for self-preservation, relinquish more than they really want to, but they know that they're not going to win this fight and they just have to let things play out, and they've suffered enough and maybe they need to try and heal. Okay, they're not going to make that decision to just take the children out along with themselves. Maybe they'd commit suicide. I'm sure victims of that sort of abuse do have suicidal tendencies, don't get the right help, and commit suicide. There so many angles here, but I don't think the first and only conclusion that someone should be leaping to and making is that she's a victim of abuse and that this is a tragedy and that she didn't get the help she needed because she's done some pretty gross things. I mean, how childish and petty to post all those things so pointedly. It's so passive aggressive. It's not a cry for help. It's planting. A cry for help. She's a therapist. She knew she could go and talk to people. Maybe she would have been uploading that type of content earlier, like when she was in that relationship. Why was she going through IVF with this person? Was she forced at gunpoint? The handgun she used to kill her own children, was she forced at gunpoint to go through IVF treatment, get implanted with his children, give birth to them? I mean, I think she's been rejected. I think she can't stand it. She can't stand the rejection because she is narcissistic. And in the ultimate narcissistic act, tragedy. So what do you think? I'm going to look this case up now and I'm going to read up about it because I'm really curious about her first marriage, when and why that broke up. Maybe that was a long time in her past, but maybe the guy got in and he got out, right? Or maybe it was something that fell apart just before she's met this other person. How did they meet? And when did they decide to have children and go through this process? Look, I mean, I don't know. They might have had a 20-year marriage, this second marriage. And then for some reason later in life, maybe for, reasons of they were both running businesses and working on careers and just sort of time got away, I don't know. But I just am guessing that it's happened pretty quickly. I'm thinking she's met him, they've got him married pretty quickly, and the IVF process, even if that's been quite long, years, might have started quite early. Women, have your anti-Müllerian hormone tests done. Your fertility, you're ripe when you're young, and that's when you've got the energy, okay, to raise children. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to do it perfectly. Do it when you're young. But if you can't or don't, have an AMH test. It is the one that they do when you're going to go through fertility treatment. It's the best way of telling where you're really at, and your fertility drops. It's peaking sort of at 22, and by 29 it is dropping. You need to get tested every year, especially if you aren't with a partner or you're not planning a family. I urge you to test every year, and just remember, look, you can't freeze your eggs. After 36, no one's going to touch you. You're not going to get it done. So freeze your eggs when you're young, maybe just in case, okay? But it's hard on your body as you get older to be pregnant and give birth. Why would you do it when you can do it when you're young and supple? And older parents overthink a lot of things with parenting, don't they? I mean, and I think when you're younger too, you're more likely to have extended family around you to help. This village atmosphere of raising children. Let's not put strain on all these individuals and these isolated couples bringing children into the world, into unhealthy relationships or unstable marriages, or just to put them in danger of violence, abuse and neglect. Just cut it out. Who knows what's driving Michele, but I can see that there are plenty of things to discuss around her having not only severe mental illness, throughout life leading up to her second marriage, but I can see possibilities for postpartum depression and psychosis. I can see possibilities that she is narcissistic. Maybe both of this unit were, but I'm not going to jump to that conclusion that she is a battered, scared wife who saw the only way out for her and her children is to murder them and kill herself. She didn't need to take her children out, and she could have stuck around to be that guiding light, that support, that trained professional who knows how to work magic in people's lives. She's not practicing what she preaches. She's failed. No, I'm not victim bashing. She didn't seek help for herself. She's maybe ignored all these signs that this person might not be the healthy one. Maybe she was the unhealthy one, and she's manipulated someone into this marriage, into this situation with children, and she can't handle the outcome. She can't handle what was going to be the status quo, which was shared custody, loss of parenting support, or whatever. She's 55 years old, and that's not where she imagined she was going to be. But she hasn't had the resilience to seek help for herself, for her children, and instead she has been the violent one. And no one has the right to make this choice, and we want to try and protect people from making these choices for themselves, let alone murdering their own children. So, you know, I think I will talk about this a bit more because I will. Okay, thanks.